Potentially catastrophic. Snow, ice storm to blast most of the Midwest, East Coast through the weekend. And probably the most alarming story here is the exploding trees. Not exaggerating. Quite literally, there is a warning that trees will be exploding. Now, you may be wondering, how is it possible? Well, they're not really blowing up. But what's happening is the sap inside the trees gets so cold, it begins to freeze. And as it does, it expands, which then causes loud popping and bangs. And the deer freak out. Now, I'm not super concerned, to be completely honest, about a winter storm, because winter storms happen in the winter, and I've lived through blizzards and all of these things. What is really strange to me is solar activity, which, of course, I periodically will cover on this channel. And give a shout out to Ben Davidson, who's the space weatherman who covers this professionally, and I find absolutely fascinating. Now, something happened recently that makes all of this interesting, I should say that. It's the worst solar storm we've seen in decades, if not ever. Maybe not ever, but I mean we've seen, right, in our lifetimes. And we saw the aurora again in the lower 48. With the NOAA forecast showing that even last night, 2 days now, the aurora was visible in the lower 48. And one thing I find particularly alarming, in Florida. Now, what's really crazy is they've actually got photos of the aurora in Mexico. Yeah, now to be fair, not with the naked eye. I think they used long exposure, and you can see that the aurora was hitting as far south as Mexico. And I have a report from the Daily Galaxy, not too sure if that's a reputable publication, but it says it's now official. The North Pole has officially moved. What does this all mean? Well, you've got conversations about climate change, man-made climate change, and I don't really know. I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers for you, nor try to assert there's a truth being hidden from you, but I have a hypothesis and I have ideas that I find to be interesting. The first thing I want to do is talk to you about this big storm that's coming because, well, everybody should know about it. It could save your life. But then the bigger question of the weather that's happening all over the planet and whether or not the great pole shift is coming and if this means y'all are cooked, because maybe it does. My friends, smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. You can follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. Subscribe to this channel for more to come. But let's talk about what's currently going on with this weather. And then what's going on with outer space. Now, I could start with the potentially catastrophic snow and ice storm that's going to blast the Midwest and the East Coast. But how about this? From 97.3 KKRC, exploding trees possible across Minnesota, Iowa, and South Dakota. What? I kid you not. I like the image they use of a mushroom cloud over a tree. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. An Arctic blast sweeping across Minnesota, Iowa, and South Dakota is cold enough that it could trigger an unusual and startling phenomenon this weekend, exploding trees. As temperatures plunge to 20 degrees below zero or colder across Minnesota, Iowa, and South Dakota on Friday and Saturday, residents may hear loud booms echoing through the frozen forests. They aren't fireworks, they're literally exploding trees from the cold. When temperatures drop this drastically, sap and moisture inside the trees freeze rapidly. As water freezes, it expands, creating immense pressure within the trunk. If the temperatures fall quickly enough, the pressure can cause the tree to split or explode with a sound like a gunshot or thunderclap. The phenomenon known as frost cracking or cryoseismic booming typically occurs when temperatures drop below minus 20, especially after milder weather. The sudden temperature swing doesn't give trees time to acclimate, making the freeze more violent. Trees most vulnerable include those with higher moisture content like oak, maple, and fruit trees. The explosive crack often happens late at night or early morning when temperatures reach their lowest point. While dramatic, exploding trees pose minimal danger to people indoors. However, stay alert when walking near wooded areas, as falling branches or split trunks can create hazards. Indeed, my friends. Exploding trees. Well, it's happening because of this massive storm, the Arctic blast that is coming our way. With the New York Post reporting, a potentially catastrophic snow and ice storm will blast several states across the U.S. this weekend, blanketing roads and trees and causing widespread power outages, forecasters warn. The storm, which will arrive late this week and last into the weekend, will be a widespread, potentially catastrophic event from Texas to the Carolinas, according to Ryan Mao. Is that how you pronounce that? A former chief scientist at NOAA. I don't know how people are going to deal with it. he said. And then they have a picture of a snowplow, because, of course, a large swath of heavy snow, sleet, and treacherous freezing rain will fall starting Friday across most of the Midwest before veering toward the East Coast through Sunday. The National Weather Service warned ice could weigh down trees and power lines, fueling massive outages. Up to 2 feet of snow can fall in the southern Appalachians, AccuWeather reported. Bone-chilling temperatures will persist in many areas, so ice may remain on roads and sidewalks, forecasters said. This is not good. Plan now. Plan for going days without power this weekend. Holy smokes. And I'm sitting here stuck in beautiful sunny Florida. What am I doing? I could be skiing. Here I am instead. To be honest, out here in Tampa, it's a little cold. Yeah, I'd say, what is it right now? It's 55 degrees, so no one's really going to the beach or going swimming. They are, but, it's not the same. Now, my friends, as America braces for this catastrophic weather, I have other questions in weather that have also occurred around the exact same time. I'm not saying they're related, but I think, considering we're talking about the weather and the breaking news is this massive storm is heading your way, I figured people would care about that. At the same time, we have a record solar storm. Take a look at this from Live Science. It's probably live science, but I like to live science. Earth hit by biggest solar radiation storm in 23 years, triggering northern lights as far as Southern California. This is now, in this solar cycle, I think around 20 times this has happened, according to Ben Davidson. The previous cycle, 2 or 3. Tell me this, in your lifetime, when have you seen the aurora in the southern states? Well, it keeps happening. It keeps happening. There's questions as to why. Now, some just say we're at solar maximum. It's a normal solar cycle, and because of this, you're going to get more aurora events. That being said, Ben Davidson points out that actually the previous solar cycles didn't have nearly this much. We're looking at 10x, 10 times the amount. That's not normal. At the same time, it is a fact. The magnetosphere is weakening. The North Pole is currently undergoing what's called an excursion, where it's moving from the North Pole, with one outlet saying it's officially moved. It's not there anymore. And that means our compasses are going to be all wrong and GPS is going to get all screwed up. We can calibrate it and fix for it. But yeah, some speculate we may be on the verge of a major pole shift. And when that happens, speculation is, as the North and the South Pole flip, which does happen due to, core mechanics, we will have no magnetic protection briefly. And by briefly, some estimate several days, upwards of several weeks, which means, how when there's big solar storms and solar flares, they're like, cell phones may go out and power may go out. Well, Ben told me it's going to send us back to the Stone Age. 2 weeks with no protection and our electronics are fried, overcharged, and useless. I hope not. Well, let me show you a bit of what we got going on here. And then I want to play a trailer for Ben's documentary about this pole shift, because while it is viewed by the mainstream sciences as pseudoscientific to claim that the Earth will also tilt, there's a theory called Adam and Eve theory, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. Maybe that's why you're watching this video, where they believe that every around 6,500 years, I believe it is, the magnetic poles flip, the Earth will rotate, and this will cause great flooding and a change in the, let's just say, makeup of the planet from ice to warmer regions. Ben said that he believes Antarctica could move to the equator. Evidence for this is the woolly mammoth. Indeed, there were mammoths that were found flash frozen. They were frozen with plant matter still in their bellies undigested. Now, what would cause them to freeze so quickly? And where did the plant matter come from? Those are interesting questions. We don't really know, but again, it's viewed as pseudoscientific. So I'm not here to tell you it's definitively true or anything, but I find these ideas interesting. Much like I find Greater Earth theory interesting, though I don't believe it's true. You know what that one is? Okay, I love this one. That's where first you get these flat earthers, right? And they're like, the Earth is flat. And then people go, how does the water stay in it? And they go, it's an ice wall, right? Antarctica is actually a wall of ice holding it all in. Well, couldn't the ice melt? Nah, it's a lot of ice. Sure. Well, after that, and people were like, but the Earth isn't flat, so your idea is dumb. Then people were like, actually, on the other side of the ice wall are other continents. That's right. The Earth is round, but it's much larger than we think. Indeed. Outside the ice wall, where the inner continents, very small, there is a great and vast land of numerous continents such as Tartaria, Lemuria, Atlantis. And people there are greatly advanced. Some people think there's reptilians, Nordics, Greys, like the aliens are actually on the planet. Okay, anyway, it's fun, but it's silly. And there's a possibility these things are real, but come on, it's not like, it's just largely not real. Let's be honest. Now, I don't know about this Earth tilt stuff, but the magnetic shift is real and it does happen. In fact, according to mainstream science, we're actually overdue. Based on the average amount of time it takes for the pole shift to happen, several 100,000 years, they believe we're overdue. If Ben is correct, we cooked. Take a look at this. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the wrong one. This is the disaster cycle, a trailer for a documentary made by Ben Davidson. The northern lights were seen in Florida again last night. This isn't just a light show, it's a warning. The pole shift, great solar blast, and cyclical disaster of Earth culminates in the next 25 years. Our film releases in 1 week. Take a listen.
Big coronal mass ejection. It's really the only natural disaster that could knock out Europe or North America's power grid.
The last one was 6,000 years ago, and it was one of the minor events. 6,000 years before that, there was a major event.
But who is aware that magnetic north is moving over time?
In the recent decade, the position of the magnetic poles has been moving very rapidly.
Luck of the draw. You make it, you make it. If you don't, you don't.
There's a lot of people that want to get out of the cities. They want to get out of the populated areas. We're not a normal campground.
The sun influences Earth's environment.
If you make it, you still might survive it, but at least you got a chance. And throughout history, that's all human beings ever needed.
The evidence on what is very likely to happen is really starting to pile up.
Sounds like something you should pay attention to. But, we got little ones, and we don't want them to be in the middle of a storm.
Earth's magnetic poles are shifting again, and the magnetic field of our planet is weakening again. That is what the disaster cycle is.
It's kind of like the more you learn, the more you don't want to know.
Realistically, it's the end of the world for most of them. All these people on the beach, all these people in the cities, they'll be gone.
The question I have is my generation in that unlucky position? And the answer might be yes.
When you get up to these more severe cases, they are not just a little bit more severe than the lower ones. They are a lot more severe.
This major event is happening. And given the implications in the geologic data, it's somewhere between remarkable and horrifying, because it's one of the most important topics in the world that virtually nobody is talking about.
The disaster cycle. I'll definitely be checking this one out. I'm a big fan of Ben's work. I find this stuff so incredibly compelling. And when I first interviewed Ben about this issue, I was very skeptical, and I thought it was going to be one of these hokey conspiracy shows that we sometimes do, where, we once brought on a flat earther and a geocentrist, and they made their arguments. To be fair, the geocentrist made much more compelling arguments than the flat earther. Geocentrist, of course, he believes that we are the center of the universe and that the universe spins around us. I guess relativistically, you could say that because, but no, we don't. Galilean science and predictions show that the planets aren't just spinning around like crazy. We're spinning around. That makes a bit more sense. But when talking with Ben, we sit down and we go over some of these issues, and he makes a bunch of points that I find to be, I would describe as kooky. He says, well, with the Indonesian glaciers, and I was like, wait, what do you mean Indonesian glaciers? I'm Tim Pool. I'm smart. How could there be glaciers in Indonesia? It's hot. I didn't say it like that. I'm actually just being a little bit self-deprecating. But I said, what, there's glaciers in Indonesia? And he's like, yes. And sure enough, I pulled him up. I said, that's very interesting. And he's like, right, they're high altitude, so it doesn't really get that hot, and they remain frozen, though they are melting. Interesting. Now, it could just be that after the Ice Age, ice was everywhere, and they remain at high altitudes where it doesn't get warm enough for the glaciers to melt. That seems to be reasonable. I think that's what the mainstream science argument is. But there's also an argument that, well, the Earth actually tilts. And that's Ben's argument, which, again, mainstream science says is not correct, but I find interesting and compelling enough to look into. And look, I'll put it like this. This is not something as simple as saying the Earth is round or flat, right? That's silly. You can take a camera and put it through a laser pointer and do experiments to see that the Earth is round. You can actually see the curvature of the Earth when you look at bridges that go past the horizon, which there are many. This is a question of whether or not something more complicated is happening that you can't just easily know about. That is, I'm more inclined to trust the mainstream science on this. And if that's the case, the pole shift likely is happening as we're overdue, but I'm not convinced the Earth is going to tilt. It's just a fun thought. But there are questions about, like, the mammoth, like we brought up, and questions about what we might discover should Antarctica ever melt. Maybe there's something there. Take a look at this from the Daily Galaxy. Earth's magnetic North Pole has officially changed position, drifting into never-before-mapped territory. How many of you knew this? That clip from Ben's documentary. This has been very important for airlines because they use instruments that are based on, well, it's a compass. They need to know which way to go. As the North Pole shifts, coordinates change, and that's going to be a problem for navigation. We're going to have to adapt to an update. Daily Galaxy says, Earth's magnetic pole has continued its long-term drift towards Siberia, officially crossing into the Russian hemisphere in 2025, according to updated geophysical models. Although the shift remains imperceptible in daily life, it introduces measurable risks to high-precision systems that rely on the alignment between magnetic and geographic reference points. Aviation, maritime navigation, autonomous systems, and defense platforms are particularly exposed to deviations caused by magnetic field drift. The latest release of the World Magnetic Model in the new high-resolution variant developed jointly by NOAA and the Centers for Environmental Information and the British Geological Survey recalibrates global magnetic parameters. These models are the international standard used by NATO members, the U.S. Department of Defense, and allied institutions to maintain directional accuracy in critical navigation and mapping systems. WMM 2025 shows the North Magnetic Pole has now shifted to a location, placing it significantly closer to Russia than Canada. Since systematic observations began in the 1830s, the pole has moved more than 2,200 kilometers, largely due to secular variation in Earth's main magnetic field, which originates in the fluid outer core. Between 1990 and 2020, pole velocity increased markedly, reaching peak migration rates of approximately 60 kilometers a year. As of the 2025 release, the speed is slowed to around 35 kilometers per year, though researchers caution this still exceeds the pre-1990 averages. The pole's motion is governed by rapid changes in the toroidal and poloidal components of Earth's magnetic field, modeled using spherical harmonic expansion. I have no idea what any of that means. So I'm just sitting here clueless going, wow, the pole's moving. But then some things happened in the news that I did track, which was particularly interesting. And that is solar storms coinciding with power outages, cell network outages, internet outages. In fact, our power went out at our studio briefly. Indeed. I can't remember which day it was, but we were doing the show somewhere else, so we were traveling. It was probably, I don't know if it was when we were in Vegas or something. But the power had gone out. No, it wasn't Vegas. When was it? I don't know. Might have been November. And my crew was like, yeah, but we have backup batteries and like the internet cut out. And I'm like, that happened at the same time as this massive solar storm. We saw stories of cell networks going out in France. The power and cell networks went out, and in Puerto Rico. And recently, Verizon saw a major hit. Now, Verizon went down, but we didn't see other carriers go down. So maybe not related unless somehow the massive solar blast only affected a certain frequency, which I doubt. More likely that was error on the part of those running the infrastructure. But when these things happen, I again pulled up, I invited Ben Davidson to discuss this. And his point, which I believe is astute, the magnetosphere is weakening, allowing more of what we would describe as normal solar activity onto the planet. When you combine that with large storms, it's penetrating the magnetosphere. We're seeing aurora events across the United States, power outages, cell disruptions. Now, hold on there a minute. You might say that's just speculative nonsense, except until you read about what I believe it's called the the South Atlantic anomaly or atmospheric anomaly. Let me pull this up. The South Atlantic anomaly. When you hear about this, you go, maybe Ben's right. I mean, we don't know for sure. And again, I'm not one to entertain crazy catastrophizing theories. It doesn't mean it's impossible, though. The Southern Atlantic anomaly is a large growing area over South America and the South Atlantic where Earth's magnetic field is significantly weaker, allowing the inner Van Allen radiation belt to dip closer to the surface. This weak spot exposes satellites and spacecraft like the ISS to increased energetic particles, potentially causing computer errors, data interference, and blackouts. Now, the important thing to understand, it's rapidly growing. The size is growing, and over the past year, it grew the size of Europe. And you can take a look at that dark spot over South America. It's getting worse. And this means it's going to have an impact on flights as well at some point, and probably already does. And some have argued that our planes are getting hardened for this. And there was another story. Let me pull this one up to add to it. I should pull this up in advance, but airline hardens for solar radiation. Because this story was, here we go. NBC News in November. All of this stuff, is it nothing? Airbus warns that solar radiation could harm key data on popular A320 aircraft. We've got cell network outages, power outages, a weakening magnetosphere, a pole shift. Now, if you put these pieces together, maybe you don't need to. But they do all point to more damage from solar radiation, and we know the magnetosphere is weakening in the Southern Atlantic anomaly. We're overdue for a pole shift. The question is, what happens when it comes? So I asked this question of myself when I was speaking with Ben. What would I do if I was the president and I was briefed? Top scientists came into the Oval Office and said, Mr. President, a pole shift is currently underway. It's going to send us to the Stone Age. Our electronics will be wiped out, and we will be left wanting. The planet is going to undergo a rapid change, and we're in trouble. What would you do? What would you do? Would you do an announcement to the American people? Of course you wouldn't. They'd panic. Is it fair to withhold the truth from them? Yes and no. I mean, people have a right to know, but there's something else. What do you do after the shift comes? If the poles weaken and we get blasted, or the big one they call it, solar radiation blast, like a Carrington event, that wipes out our electronics and sends us to the Stone Age, how do you rebuild? Well, you're going to need a source of energy. And you're going to need a source of energy to be able to pump oil, because oil is the best source. But to start, you're not going to have an easy go of getting the oil out rapidly enough to reignite society, especially when the computers go down. So what you're going to need is alternate forms of energy that currently is shielded and warehoused, that in the event of a major collapse, you'll be able to bring out totally mechanized vehicles, mechanical vehicles, non-computer vehicles, to reignite oil production so that you can use that oil to generate electricity and get the machine back a churning. So I'd basically need to convince everybody to start building like solar panels and wind turbines. See, Landman had it right. When Billy Bobs shows the wind turbines to this young lawyer and she says, green energy encroaching on you, and he goes, not green, alternative. The wind turbines were built to provide electricity to the oil pumps to get the oil out because they couldn't get transmission lines to the oil fields. Now, ain't that something? And that got me thinking. If I was the president, I was told this was coming, I'd say, how do we get oil production up and running if our grid is knocked out? And they say, well, you'll need to rapidly deploy means of generating energy, like wind or solar. Yeah, like wind or solar, which they've been telling us like crazy to build because of climate change. Now, maybe it's climate change. Who am I to say, right? Maybe it's climate change and solar storms and radiation. But with this major ice storm coming, There are conversations in this space about if the magnetosphere is weakening and solar radiation is penetrating the Earth, it's going to affect our weather patterns and they'll become more severe. So some actually think, and again, I'm not saying it's true, I don't know, that climate change is not man-made, but solar activity. And with a weakened magnetosphere, it's getting worse. One of the prevailing theories on climate change has been that it's just solar cycles and solar activity. Maybe. In which case, maybe the fervor around why we need green energy is not to get away from oil. We don't care about that. We like the oil. It's energy dense. The issue is that when the big one hits, like the Carrington event, which outside of all of this catastrophizing, we expect it to happen at some point, a major solar storm that knocks us to the Stone Age. Are we prepared for it? Maybe. The president said, be ready to deploy fully mechanical vehicles towing alternate sources of energy like wind turbines to build immediately and then power oil refineries and drills, pumps, to begin energy production immediately. And we have to do it everywhere. But sir, how do we get the economy to shift towards the production of these things? You'll need a campaign to convince them? Government subsidies? Solyndra? Maybe. But who am I? But a man on the internet who whinges and complains. I don't really know what's really going to happen. And I'm not a big fan of alternate science theories and things like this. Flat Earth is stupid. And I do think the interesting question here is more so based on the Carrington event and the fact that we know the poles are shifting. With that being said, something is going to happen soon. Are we prepared for it? And the question then is it happening now? Now, I don't know that the Earth is going to flip. Ben thinks it will, and I'm compelled by his arguments. He's not some crackpot conspiracy guy. And I got to be honest, with all due respect, Ben, my first impression when they were like, we're going to do a show with this guy who thinks the Earth is going to fall, I'm like, okay, here we go. And it's actually completely rational. Maybe he's wrong, but he's tracking legitimate government data, scientific data, legitimate space weather forecasting. He's not water dowsing or anything like that. He's looking at actual NOAA releases, solar activity, and he's forecasting based on the legitimate reports we get from the government as well. The difference? Government reports say, no, everything's fine. It's just a solar storm. And then he's saying, yeah, how did we have 20 this solar cycle and only 2 the last 3 or 4 times that we've tracked? And maybe as long as we've been around, or no? That's an interesting question. I got to tell you, when it was like the 3rd or 4th time they told me the aurora was going to hit West Virginia, I was like, whoa, wait, what's going on here? That's not normal for my life. And I am but a blip in the history of this planet, right? Billions of years. But in my lifetime, it's not happened before. Is something new happening? It looks like the answer is yes. Maybe it's a standard polar shift. Solar activity is high, combined with a standard pole shift event. Will it send us back to the Stone Age? I don't know. The question is, are we prepared for it in any capacity? I mean, every single car will be disabled. For those who aren't familiar with the Carrington event, and maybe I got the name right. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. The Carrington event. We'll pull this one up. It's a major geomagnetic storm that took place in 1859. And word is, were this storm, a similar one, to happen today, it would send us back to the Stone Age. A very bright solar flare on September 1st, 1859. A storm of this magnitude occurring today has the potential to cause widespread disruptions, blackouts, and damage to the grid. You combine that with a weakened magnetosphere and a pole shift or the Southern Atlantic anomaly, and I have to say, it's not looking good for us. It's interesting, isn't it? I don't know. And I'm not a researcher, so I recommend you follow Ben and Noah and other mainstream scientists as well to get a well-rounded understanding of what's really going on with this. What I can say is, of all the disaster cycle stuff that I've heard about with, like the super volcano or Planet Nibiru and those kind of things, the super volcano one's compelling. The Nibiru stuff's fun, but silly sci-fi. This actually has me a little bit freaked out. But interesting nonetheless. I suppose the question for you is, whether it's true or not, what do you do? Hope for the best and prepare for the worst. And I hope that's something y'all consider. Maybe nothing will happen, but if it were, Do you think the government's going to come out and issue a press conference and tell you what's going to happen? Yeah, maybe only at the last minute, when the public can already see it with their own private telescopes and instruments. But who knows? Who knows? I'm going to wrap it up there. Smash that like button, subscribe, share the show. Thank you so much for hanging out. We'll see you all in the next segment or tonight for Timcast IRL. Again, subscribe, and thanks for watching.